Let's move along to the display of surfaces. And we need to look at a new control box for that purpose. So go up to Element and click on the 3D and B-Spline settings box. And this is what we see, and I'll go quickly through the different settings we can make. First is tolerance, which sets the error distance between data points and the curve when using the least squares B-Spline method. This won't have much effect on what we're doing, so leave that at whatever default value is showing on your screen. The next set of settings are more important. That's the B-Spline control polygon, and you'll see 4 settings there, and the ones on the screen are the usual default settings. Now, you don't normally need to see the curve or surface control polygons unless you're going to adjust the curves by moving the polygon poles. But we can experiment with those, and we shall. Next is the surface ISO lines, which sets the number of isometric rule lines on a surface. The U direction is determined by the first profile or boundary element that you select, and the V direction is the subsequent opposite direction. You can set the number of ISO lines to display differently in each direction. Now, I did look at those a little while ago in a previous video. Next is surface solid as cell type. The default is wireframe, and you only use the surface setting, which is the other setting here, unless you're using a pre-MicroStation version J, which will be MicroStation 5 and below. That's ancient history, and you're unlikely to see that. And the last setting is suppress rule lines. And if on these 2 settings, reduce the number of ISO lines on B-splines and complex blending faces. By default, the complex blending faces option is suppressed. So let's go ahead and see how some of these settings work. I'm going to move that over to the side here. The drawing you're looking at right now is available to you, and these are the profiles I'm going to be using. In this video, it will be simply this green one, but the file you're looking for in your working files folder is called module8profiles.dgn. So if you open that up now, we can start working on this particular profile. The other 2 here will be used in subsequent videos. So let's just zoom into this one. Now you'll find 2 versions of this actually. The one you're seeing here is an isometric view, but the profiles are displayed in view orientation. And you can also go to design cube orientation if you wish. See the same objects, but now we're in strict isometric design cube variation. So you see the same things, different way. Just depends on how you want to work. I'm going to work in this one. I'm going to need a specific tool to work on this, and we need to open up the surfaces tool set. So we go to surfaces, and I'm going to open this as a toolbox. We'll look at most of these tools later on. Right now, I need a specific tool, and that's this one. And I need the Surface by Edge Curves tool. So make sure that one is active. And I'm going to go across and change information here. I'm going to change these to 4 and 4 for my rule lines. And I'll leave the default values here. Now what you're seeing on the screen here is 4 separate profiles. And they are line strings, but separate. And the tool we're using requires 4 profiles such as this. So again, the tool is running. And I'm going to select all 4 at once with a crossing box and data point. Data point again. And now we see the results of the B-spline surface display. Now note that we're not seeing the surface here because I've not shaded it. We're simply seeing the rule lines for the surface. Let's try this again, and I'm going to go back to the original 10. 10. And we'll try the same thing. I'll do a Control Z, and I will start the tool and select all 4. Data point, data point. Now we have 10 rule lines. The apparent shape of this object seems to change, even though it's the same object. It's just that we now have more ISO rule lines to display the true shape of this object. Let's try this again. This time I'm going to change the polygon control and make each one visible. So now we have both the surfaces and the polygons displaying. So again, Control Z, undo that. Make sure the tool's running. Selection set, data point, data point. This now looks much more complex. And that's because I'm seeing the 10 by 10 rule lines plus the control polygons for this particular surface. Now, each one of these points can be manipulated, if necessary, to change the shape of this object. So, what does this thing look like in reality? Well, let's just do a shade. So, F6 on my system to apply shading. And we see this. We should clear things up a little bit, I think, by doing Control Z. Going back in and turning these to invisible and invisible. And we'll run the tool again, select everything, and there we have the shaded view. So quite a complex shape, and not one that you would readily expect to see from the 4 original line strings that we're using as the profiles. But this is the nature of surfaces. It's sometimes very difficult to predict what the exact shape of the surface will be after you apply the tool. But you can tweak the surfaces by manipulating the control points, as we'll be doing later on. Now, if you do need to show control points, then what settings should you generally use? Typically, setting the U and V ISO lines between 4 and 10 provides a reasonable wireframe display. And generally, it's usually more efficient to work in wireframe mode for most drawing and editing procedures, and use the color shading as we have now for checking your work. Now, the next video we'll start working with some surface creation.